Hi and welcome to my channel. In today's video we're talking all things this plant, the Pilea Peperomioides, also known as the Chinese money plant. Personally, when I think of houseplants, this is one of the ones I think of, one of the iconic ones. I think because it's got this amazing succulent circle leaves, and I think it's just such a fantastic plant to add a pop of texture into your plant collection. But before we get into the video, hi, my name's Alexis and this is Wild Houseplants. I'm a houseplant enthusiast and I also work as a houseplant technician, which basically means when I'm not looking after my own plants, I'm looking after other people's. If you don't follow me over on Instagram, you can find me there at Wild Houseplants. And if you do enjoy this video today, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps my channel. Okay, so let's start by talking about my care conditions in my home. So when it comes to people talking about how to look after a particular plant, I always think it's worth prefacing by just saying that obviously everybody's conditions in their homes are different. So it's not like I can tell you exactly what's in my home and you're going to be able to completely recreate it in yours, because your conditions are going to be different from mine. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my conditions. So I live in North London and we obviously have not the most amazing temperate climate here, but I would say my home is generally between about 18 and 25 degrees, and I don't run any humidifiers in my home. We actually have relatively good humidity here, so I would say my home normally sits around 50 to 60% humidity. If we have a lot of rain, which is quite frequently, it can get into the 70s quite easily, and if we do have a particularly hot dry spell, then it might get down into the 30s and 40s, but that's not generally for any length of time. And if I want to add a bit more humidity into my home, I'll literally just open the windows. I don't run any humidifiers at all. Okay, so that's a little bit about my home, and now let's talk about how I grow this plant in my home. So I've had this big plant here for around about 3 to 4 years, and I got it as a very small plant, probably about that big. And what happens with these plants as they grow is obviously the stem will continue to grow, and you're obviously going to lose these leaves over time. So you will need to add in a support if you want the main plant to grow quite straight. And I do suggest that you basically take the mother plant, the main plant, and you do support it. Otherwise it will get very top heavy and it will start to drop over, and the stem could potentially snap as it gets very heavy up here. Okay, so let's talk about light. I would say this plant has been living for the last sort of 2 years in medium bright light. My living room is south facing and it lives in my living room on a shelf that's quite high up, so it doesn't actually get a view of the sky, which is why I would say it's medium light. But recently it got too tall for the shelf, and so I've taken it down and put it slightly closer to the window on a small table, and I've actually put it under a grow light because I've decided I really want to try and maximize this plant this growing season and really see what its potential is, because it's grown fantastically in sort of medium light over the last few years, but I thought I really want to give it a bit of a boost and see just how big I can get it over the next couple of months. So that's what's going on right now. So yes, it can absolutely tolerate medium light, but the more light you give it, the better. Although I would say it probably is going to bleach if you give it too much prolonged direct sun. So I reckon it can handle a couple of hours in the morning or the afternoon, but it definitely doesn't want to be sitting in direct sun for too much of the day, especially in the warmest part of the day, the heat of the day, because you will start to see these leaves start to bleach. And obviously what's so wonderful about this plant is this fantastic pop of this green, and we don't want it to become bleached and yellow. I touched on humidity when I told you about the conditions in my home. So as I said, I currently I'm somewhere between 50 and 60% humidity most of the time, and this plant is more than happy there. So if you had a very dry environment, you may want to supplement with a humidifier, but otherwise I would say this houseplant is absolutely fine in normal room humidity. When it comes for soil for this plant, they're not particularly fussy, but I would say that for some reason the the soil that the plants always come with for Pilea tends to be really poor quality in my experience, looking after mine, but also looking after Pileas for lots of clients. It tends to be a soil that dries out very much on the top and then is quite dense and moisture retentive at the bottom. And what you then get is that the top roots are getting quite dry, but then when you're watering it, these ones at the bottom are sitting wet for too long, and then you're increasing your chance of things like root rot, and these plants do not bounce back particularly well from root rot, in my experience. So what I would say is repot your plant once it's acclimated into your home, and then you want to put it in a mix of cocoa coir, perlite and orchid bark. You want it to be a nice chunky mix, but you do want it to have some moisture retentive properties in there as well. So the cocoa coir is going to do that, but the perlite and the orchid bark is going to provide lots of aeration for the roots as well. So you can see mine here. I have mine in a clear pot, which I also highly recommend because it's really great for monitoring the root system, but it also really helps you to keep an eye on when the plant needs to be watered. So when I can see that there's moisture sitting on the plastic pot here, I know that I don't need to water this plant. But when I can see that it's dry like it is at the moment, then I can obviously give it a really good water. Another way that I know that this plant needs to be watered is these leaves are really quite sort of succulent in style, and when they are full of water, when the plant's been recently watered and these are full of water, when you were to go to sort of, I think it's called the taco test, people tend to call it, but when you do this with the leaves, they would feel like they could snap quite easily. You feel that there's lots of sort of water in the stem. Right now they feel quite easy to manipulate, and so that's another sign for me that this plant is ready to have a drink. Like I say, everybody's conditions are different in their home. So I'm not saying if I water mine every 2 weeks, you should water yours as well. You should always check the soil before you water. But on average, I would say that I water this plant about once every 10 days to 2 weeks. But obviously, again, it depends on the size of the pot, the conditions in your home, the size of the plant, and so on. If you don't have clear pots, another good option would be terracotta. These plants do really well in terracotta because terracotta is porous, and so it draws out the moisture, and so you're much less likely to overwater your plant. I would therefore say that just obviously keep an eye on the moisture level within the soil, because again, terracotta is going to dry out your plant that much quicker, so just to make sure that you're not therefore underwatering your plants. When it comes to fertilizer, these guys are quite hungry, and I would suggest that you do fertilize them regularly. I've mentioned this before in a previous video. Everybody has different thoughts on when you should fertilize your plants. I personally fertilize my plants all year round as long as they're actively growing. This plant is always putting out new growth, therefore I'm going to fertilize it with every water all year round. So when it comes to propagation, these plants are really easy to propagate, and they're one of the reasons why I think this plant is also just such a fantastic plant to have in your home, because it grows fast, it looks fantastic, it's got this wonderful, textured appearance, pop of this lovely green circles, and also they produce pups, these babies, prolifically, so you can propagate them and have more plants for your home, or you can give them to friends and family. If you want to propagate, you're literally going to get a stem like this. Let me grab my scissors. Okay, so you're going to find a baby in your pot. Get a clean pair of scissors, and then you're just going to cut at the base of the stem, where it comes into contact with the soil. Mine's just got a bit caught here. So there we go. I've just cut that one off there. And then I'm going to leave this just to callus over for probably an hour. We'll do it. Just so it's hard to the touch and not wet. And then I'm literally going to place that in like a small shot glass of water, small vessel of water, and then it will just grow roots. And once the roots are around about a few centimeters long, you can actually go ahead and pot that up. Just bear in mind when you are potting these up that you want to be potting it into a pot which is obviously suitable for the root system. This is going to have a really tiny root system, so you don't want to be putting it in a massive pot with loads of soil. because the roots won't be able to process that amount of water in the soil, and you're going to probably lead to things like root rot. So put it into a small pot with a nice chunky mix, and then just keep an eye on it, and that will grow and grow and grow. And then in time, it will produce its own babies. Here is another Pilea that I own. This is actually meant to be a Pilea mojito, which is supposed to have splashy leaves. And you can see there's a little bit, but it's never really been particularly splashy. And I think my plan for this at the moment is just to put it in some really high light and see if I can get that little bit of splashy variegation going on. But these will naturally become quite top heavy. So I'm going to actually stake this one today. You can just use like a wooden stake, or there are some very nice prettier stakes out there, but at the moment this is what I've got. So I'm just going to insert this into the soil, and then I'm going to attach it just with some floristry wire that I've got here. And I think that will help this one just to have a little bit of support. And as I say, I'm going to try and pop this in some really bright light and see if I can get it to look like how it's meant to look. Which at the moment, it just looks like a normal Pilea, which is absolutely fine. But I did pay a little bit extra for it to be supposedly variegated. So let's see if we can get it to live up to its potential. Okay. This one needs a drink as well. So yeah, I've just supported that one there. I would always recommend that you support the main mother plant, and then in order to sort of, obviously as these plants grow, they're going to lose their leaves going up here, and they'll start to look quite bare and maybe not so attractive. So the main thing is, although you may want to remove some of the pups and propagate them, and that's absolutely fine, I would recommend that you leave a good 2 or 3 minimum in the pot, so that they can actually start to crawl out of the pot like this and fill out this bottom section here, which helps to hide this sort of not very attractive stem bit here. And I think that makes it look like a much more attractive plant. Okay, so this one's ready for a water. This one is also ready for a water. And this one, which is actually a pup from the mother plant, is ready for a repot. So whilst I always talk about, you know, staking your main mother plant, this one actually just grows off a shelf like this, and I think it looks super cute. So I think what's nice when you have more than one of a plant is you can get them to grow in different ways. So whereas this one, I've staked it and then I sort of let these ones sort of crawl out the bottom of the plant, this one just looks really, really fun on a shelf on its own, just hanging off like this. But it's drying out very, very quickly, and I know that it's definitely in need of a repot. So let's give this a repot now. Okay, so I've got my pre-made DIY soil mix here. This is a mix of houseplant soil or cocoa coir, perlite and orchid bark. It's got some really nice moisture retentive properties in there, but it's also got some nice chunkiness in there as well, which helps the roots to breathe. Just a little pro tip, I like to put some kitchen towel just on the top of my DIY soil mix. It just like pulls out some of the moisture from the soil, and it prevents your soil from going moldy. So there you go. I'm going to be a bit of a rebel and not use a potting mat. So I'm just going to squeeze, and hopefully our plant will come out quite easily. Yeah. You can see the roots there at the bottom. I'm going to just gently try and remove some of this soil. This is actually my soil mix that I've potted it up previously, so I'm not super worried about removing all of it. It's just to sort of loosen the roots ever so slightly. And then we'll size it up by 1 pot size. You don't want to size up too much. you only want to go up really 1 or 2 pot sizes at a time. And what's nice here, you can see that this plant has produced lots of its own pups already. And again, I'm going to leave these pups in here because they're going to start to fill out the base of the pot, because I like this one to hang off the shelf. So as this one's going to be hanging, these are going to start growing up, and then you're going to have different levels, which when it comes to houseplants, I really think it's nice to have lots of different levels. It really helps on like a shelf when you're decorating it with plants to have lots of different height going on with your plants. Okay, so I've just loosened the bottom bit there. I don't want to mess with it too much more. The plant is healthy and happy, so if it's happy, don't mess with it too much. I'm just going to go and get a slightly bigger pot. Okay, so we're going up from, this size to this size. You can see it's about the same height, but it's just got a little bit more width to it. So I start by putting a little bit of fresh substrate into the bottom, like that. Then we'll place our plant in. Now, if I was planning to stake this plant, I would do it at this point. So I'd get my stake in and position my plant. But as I said to you, I like this one to be like trailing off the shelf. So I'm not planning to stake this one. And then I'm just going to fill in around the sides. It's going to get a boost of nutrients from this fresh soil, and it'll put it in good stead for the growing season ahead. I'm a bit weird. I actually really love repotting. I don't know how you guys feel, if you like repotting or not. Let me know in the comments, but I actually find it quite therapeutic. Always tap the pot up just to settle the soil around the root system. Okay, and there we have it. All repotted. I'm going to give this a good drink. I'm actually going to give all 3 of them a good drink because they're all ready for a drink, and then pot them back in their places. I've just put a little bit of weak fertilizer in my watering can here. I use the liquid gold leaf fertilizer. I've been using this for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and it does my plants really well. So just water that in there. I like to fertilize my plants if I've got time, like this, over a pot and then over a bowl, and then any of the fertilizer water that's left over, I put it into the plants and my pots in my garden, just so they can get a little boost of fertilizer too. If any of you have one of these Pilea mojitos and yours isn't particularly splashy either, let me know. Or if yours is doing really well and it is splashy, then let me know what you're doing that I'm not doing right. I think it's just a light thing, to be honest, but yeah, there's a few leaves that are a bit splashy, but for the most part, not a lot. And then the big guy. I'm just going to let those ones drain off now. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you have got any questions, obviously please drop me a comment below. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. See you later.